You're all welcome again to this video tutorials for the MPH 812 Health Research Methodology. Thank you again for joining in this class. I promised I was going to give you a tutorial to complement the literature review lectures we had last week, Sunday, and the recording that I gave you the link during the week. So this is part 2 that will help you to understand how to conduct the empirical review section of the literature review. Okay, so we will quickly do that within the time we have. I will share this slide with you so that we will kick off. All right, so we're going to look at one of the techniques, an important technique for conducting critical appraisal, which is the tool for developing the empirical review of selecting published articles that are relevant to the subject you are trying to investigate. Because in the literature review, there is a section, a subsection called empirical review, has the function of scoping the length and breadth of the problem phenomenon that you wish to address, identifying what is fully known, what is fully revealed in literature, and what is partially revealed and what is not revealed at all, or what is not recorded. And then the question comes, how do we know what is fully revealed or documented in the literature, in journal articles that you're going to, or in the body of knowledge, and what is partially known and what is not known at all? And this is what we call scoping. You're scoping, identifying the dimension within the continuum of knowledge in that subject area. So it's not done haphazardly, it is done systematically because it's a science. All right, so we call that technique critical appraisal, and this is how to extract what contributes to your research work from journal articles that are published. And usually, the later articles are the current one. The older ones have been overtaken by events and time. And sometimes it is necessary to include older ones, especially when you want to identify trends. The trends. Don't use old ones because any old published work may have been overtaken. Whatever contribution such published work is making has been overtaken by time. And so avoid just picking any journal you see on in the internet, especially you Google some topics and then you identify titles and then download. No, you don't do that. That is not systematic. That's not appropriate. Most of the times, those are materials that are uploaded by the authors and they are usually old. You need to go to databases. There are special databases by publishers, databases on the internet that house a lot of published work, recent published work. So if you are doing an MPH, 5 years, articles that are 5 years old and early and later are usually appropriate for you. And if you are doing a PhD, 3 years, 2 years, so like 75% of your work should be 2 years old, and then the other remaining will be older. Now, if you want to identify trends, occurrence of trends in the problem area, you may need to consult older material, but that means you're going to set them in sequence from oldest through to the latest so that you can identify the trend, whether the trend of the condition you are interested in is worsening or is stable or it's improving. Okay, and that's the only reason. Well, one of the reasons why you would consult very old articles. Another reason why you would need to consult older articles if you want to establish when a particular theory used in the study was developed. Okay, you want to identify historical antecedent of a particular theory you're applying in your study. Right, so let's go on to critical appraisal. What is it? So research, like we have said and we have learned, involves scholarship and requires skills that confer appreciable level of rigor in developing your research agenda. Scholarship here simply means your ability to select, study, to characterize the phenomenon of interest that you are trying to work on. All right. So a scholar is one who is able to sit down quietly without being distracted and identify materials that you are going to learn from. And you make appropriate notes. You don't copy, make notes of lesson learned from each of the material you are. Now, this involves ability to conduct the following. So critical appraisal requires critical thinking that produces original study domain to solve problems in real world. All right, critical thinking. Critical thinking means you are going to identify the components and the characteristics of the area of your study. All right. So critical thinking that produces original study. That's what critical appraisal means. So you're going to appraise the material you have, the ones that meets the criteria selected, and the one that does not is discarded. Secondly, critical appraisal involves application of innovative protocols that results in breaking new grounds. And this is what research is all about. You are breaking new grounds. New grounds can be explaining what has been explained previously, but an innovative way of elucidating and adding more meaning to the dynamics that have been explained previously. All right, so another way is to provide understanding of the theoretical underpinning of the problem phenomena being observed. So critical appraisal provides us that important understanding so that we can explain carefully and accurately. So like I said, a scholar is one who has the capacity to study, not just read, and understand principles and concepts without being easily distracted in the process. All right, so critical appraisal requires scholarship. Scholarship, you must be committed, it is intentional, you plan it and you gather all your resources and you begin to identify the content and the constitution and the characteristics of the phenomenon of interest in your study. Now, this particular video will help us to gain certain skills. So by the end of this tutorial on research critical appraisal for developing empirical review, each student that goes over it should, one, understand the meaning of critical appraisal and how it contributes to developing the knowledge base of the empirical review component of the literature review that you are preparing. Two, understand how the procedure of critical appraisal is carried out and how it enables the conduct of what we refer to as gap analysis. All right, gap analysis, very important aspect of research. Without identifying the gap, you're going to end up repeating what is already known. So you want to scope your subject area, the field, and identify areas that are fully clarified and information is replete and understanding is clear, and then the areas that are partially explored and requiring more studies, and areas that have not been studied. So that is what we mean by gap analysis, to identify the gap that your research is going to fill. Thirdly, apply critical appraisal technique in identifying resources in published article to fit the thesis of the research paper being developed. All right. So the resource is the published articles in databases, and we need to go there, collect those material, and then use it to synthesize information that will help us to design and implement our study. Now, you don't just pick any article. These articles must be properly written, fitting, and of high quality that is reliable. Okay? All right. So the question is, what is critical appraisal? We're going to look at that now. Critical appraisal refers to the approach of reading and studying a research paper that enables the reader to, one, determine whether the study is valid, what the study is saying, what the study is concluding, what the findings of the study is, whether it is true and can be trusted, or it is just speculative. No basis, no foundation, cannot be trusted, not realistic. Two, understand the results of the study and also determine the criteria to make such a judgment about the paper you are analyzing. And then decide whether the result can be applied to local principles underpinning the study requiring its resources. All right. So this is an important diagnostic and prognostic process or procedure that will help us to identify materials that are suitable to be part of our study in building the coherence of our narrative, so that the principles are connected, theories are connected, and the problem is clearly identified and studied. Okay, let's look at sources of innovation, sources where we can get new materials, high-class materials that will help to build our argument up. So we have libraries and databases. These are indispensable sources of innovative research that we need to be aware of. We need to get to know where these resources are. So the two basic ones are libraries and databases. Now, libraries are where information resources are deposited. There are physical libraries, there are libraries online. So these are valuable repositories of books, digital resources that are available to be consulted online. And the librarians are skilled in navigating the information resource environment. Please, if you cannot find these materials by yourself, consult the librarian in your institution. Cavendish, I know, has a library, a digital and a hard copy library, so you can go there as the librarian to assist you. Now, databases are also available in these libraries, and they're also available online. You can have them. I'll give you one or two of them as we proceed. So databases are digital repositories available online, usually set up by publishers, and you can access them. You can access them most from your desktop or even your handset. The commonest of the databases is the PubMed. In fact, that should be your first bus stop. Your first approach is to check your PubMed. Whenever you have any resource, go and check, and it's health science resource. Quickly check this link here. So just copy this link, place it on your search field, and then click. You have PubMed is the government of United States Medical Library, and all published health science materials are there. So that's your first one. Yeah, and they have free ones, free text, full text, abstracts, and ones that requires you to subscribe. But nowadays we're having more open access journals, so you have them deposited there. Your institution may have this particular database, the HINARI. HINARI is a WHO database of health sciences, agriculture, and all that. So you can ask your librarian about the HINARI. All African institutions are giving access to this database. Then you have the AJOL, African Journal Online. It's available online. Just Google AJOL and you have the resources there. There are journals published from various universities in Africa and deposited in this repository. Now, these are resources for impacting your research output positively. And please, you need to go to these databases and more publishers like Sage. Sage has a database that you can access. We have JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. We have Lancet. These are all databases. You have many of them. All the publishers that publish these journals in public health, they have databases that you can approach. All right, so please apply them without restraint. Without them, your work will be elementary and empty. Never think you have all the information for your research in your head or from Google. You can also check Mendeley. Mendeley is another database that will give you access. Now, why is critical appraisal important? That's the question we need to answer here. In the contemporary world of research, innovations are rapidly becoming obsolete. So materials that you have picked up in a journal article published in 2010 in health science is obsolete. It is old. It is old, not relevant again. Events have overtaken them. Or you pick up something in 2012 or something in 2015. There are latest events, modifications to those reports. So it's important that you start picking your work in the year before you. Now we are in 2022. Begin to check 2022 materials, 2021 material, 2020 material. All right, don't bother going to 20 because it's easy for you to just go on Google, but go on databases. They are arranged according to earliest, latest publication. All right. So please make sure if you are doing your master's that an article that is 5 years old is too old for graduate research. If you like, 70% of your work should not be more than 2 years old. All right, please make sure that you right? Make sure that your work is current. 75% of your your references or your citation, please make sure that they are within 2-3 years old, nothing more. Probably, if you want to identify trends, you can go beyond 3 years to 5 years, or even 10 years. Now, what is considered new knowledge last month in some fields may be old today because of how things are changing. All right. So, uh, re, uh, um, using material that are 3 years old, probably that study has been overflogged in the databases, and that you're only going to repeat what is already fully known. All right. Now, critical appraisal ensures that evidence for any decision or conclusions that may inform policy are based on reliable research and applied to appropriate persons and situations. Critical appraisal is a vital step in the practice of evidence-based medicine or evidence-based healthcare. Because of the rapid changes in technology, there are certain practice that may not be relevant today. Probably was relevant 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There are certain conclusions that are not relevant anymore because events have overtaken them. Please make sure that the work you are doing is current enough. Now, what is evidence-based medicine or evidence-based health for that matter, or public health, evidence-based in general? Evidence-based medicine refers to this. I'm putting circuit. Evidence-based medicine refers to the conscientious, explicit, and judicious use of current best evidence in making decisions about the care of individual patients. The practice of evidence-based medicine means integrating individual clinical expertise with the best available external clinical evidence from systematic research. Well, generally what we can say is, I can just summarize this to me for every field. It applies to every field, not just medicine. Medicine would be because of the hazard such practice places the patient or client. Therefore, the latest practice with the evidence, scientific evidence for its effectiveness is what should be applied. So initially, evidence-based was based on clinical practice, but today evidence-based is in every area. All right. So what is important here is providing the best conclusion from research that makes the difference and provide service that is profitable and effective. Now, this is what the evidence-based framework I've just created looks like. So evidence-based healthcare research is therefore an ecological approach to consider what research outcomes offer the public in the best available and applicable options based on tested scientific proofs. Based on tested scientific proof, not just speculation. There are lots of speculations going on today, which needs to be validated from well-designed research. And therefore, this, you would see these three boxes. The first is best evidence available. What the research is providing is the best evidence after considering everything. So this best evidence informed by scientific basis of appropriately selected theories and concepts built into the conceptual framework to guide the implementation of the research questions raised and the thesis of the study under analysis. Now, that is where you can get the best evidence, because this is scientifically structured studies that will provide an end product. Now, this is correct. The best evidence is connected with research product. That's the end product. You see, the end product feeds back to the evidence supports the end product. So the end product of research is it considers the benefit of the research product to the public. So whatever the evidence is means that it will not be harmful to the consumers. It will be useful and effective to the consumers. And then you have this, the experience or the expertise of the researcher is also a factor in evidence-based studies or evidence-based practice. Now, the expert here is an experienced researcher. So the experienced researcher aims to provide the best product, the best conclusion, the best output, the best answers to the research questions. And then what guides the whole process of evidence-based is the ethical consideration, the concern for the consumers of the research product is the ethical consideration in the evidence-based healthcare. Now, there are key steps. To critical appraisal. First, asking focused, answerable questions is important. Let your research question be one that can be answered. And if it cannot be answered, that means there is need to study deeply and provide an answer. Accessing relevant information to get the evidence. So this is a search for reliable materials and resources that will facilitate the research. Then appraising the information that has already been sourced for validity and relevance. Then applying the information derived from this research that is designed and the implementation of the study. So then auditing by evaluating how well the evidence fits into the framework for data collection. So all of these are important key steps when conducting critical appraisal. How do we do critical appraisal? Well, critical appraisal is a scholarly activity, all right? It's a scholarly activity for matured researchers. So first of all, the critical appraisal of a paper, a published paper, should start with finding the research question in the paper itself. So how do you do that? You read through, you see within the introduction section of the paper, you would see all the elements that constitute the scoping of the problem, question emerging from the problem phenomenon, and then the objective. You see that in the introductory part of the published paper. Now, critical appraisal is a component of developing the evidence the literature review provides, and the researchers provides the researcher's argument. So the evidence, the literature review is an important evidence that the researcher requires to sustain the argument they are making. And critical appraisal starts with aligning the research question in the study with the objective and focusing on the specific objectives and research hypothesis that guides the entire study, which is a scientific criteria, all right, that establishes the foundation of the phenomenon being studied. Now, for the critical appraisal, we set the criteria and purpose of the appraisal. So this is how it is done. Note that every good research begins with a focused question and a clear statement of objective, followed by hypothesis about the underpinning dynamics of the problem phenomenon. Setting the criteria for critical appraisal, first identify the science underpinning the study problem being reviewed in the paper. Now, if this is absent, then the paper is weak and not based on scientific foundation and should be discarded. Again, variables in the study is an important criteria for critical appraisal. The basis for identifying the variables in the study is the science that has been identified. Okay, the science that explains the dynamics of the problem phenomenon. Now, there must be sufficient evidence that variables in the study are appropriately selected. You don't just put in, after defining your objective, and then you start to pick variables at random. No, the variables are appropriately selected, and the method of measurement is also identified, because poorly developed scales of measurement of moderating and outcome variable will invalidate the result. So it's very important that the variables can be measured, and the method of measurement, scoring, there are statistical methods of measuring variables using your data collecting instrument. Now, how should selection of variable be achieved? Now, by considering underpinning dynamics as defined by the appropriate theories claimed to elucidate appropriately the problem phenomenon. This is how it's done. So you can see how important theories and concepts are in defining the variables in the study. Now, it is important that we examine the alignment that holds together the objectives, especially the specific objective, the research hypothesis, guided by the scientific criteria that is established in the literature review. So there must be an alignment from the title, the problem phenomenon identified, the research question raised, and all of these are considered. And once they are aligned, then we know where our journey is towards a definite conclusion. Now, it is important to note this, that the criteria for critical appraisal forms the scope for determining good research to be selected and considered. The three sciences in public health studies are the epidemiological principles, theoretical framework, public health principles of prevention and control, and the conceptual framework. Now, these are the criteria. If any published paper does not speak to these three sciences, the epidemiological principle, theoretical framework, public health principles of prevention and control, and the conceptual framework, then such a paper is superficial, having nothing to contribute. Abandon it. Don't use it, because it's not valid. Whatever conclusion that will come out of it is not valid. So we start with finding the research questions raised by the paper being reviewed. So every good paper should have important research questions raised along the scoping of the problem phenomenon. It is where the problem cannot be answered that you will consider it as necessary to investigate, to carry out your study in that area, not the area where the answers are obvious. Any study that is focusing in areas that answers are available and obvious is repeating what is already known. So the research question must be relevant to the problem phenomenon. There must be a link. The research question must be emerging from the problem phenomena and should be conceived to be coming out from the identified problem, all right, problem context, and should be seen as having not been answered previously in appropriately in previous studies or not at all. Okay, so this would be the justification to engage in the study because the questions still remain. Now consider the alignment between the question raised by the study and the objective of the paper. All right, again, every good paper should have objective statement, and that the objective statement represent course of action to be taken to resolve the problem identified by providing appropriate answers to the research question. This is very important that your study, you have asked the correct question that relates to the problem phenomena, and that you have set course of action to answer those questions in your methodology. And so if a paper is not well written, all of these will be in disarray. All right, now the question is, what is a focused question? How do you know a question that is focused? A focused question refers to a research question that addresses a specific problem. Okay, a specific problem may be the disease type or severity, and then population, from the population, something about the population, the group, age, or the intervention that has been applied, like drugs, vaccine for treatment or prevention, and then outcomes, for instance, relief of symptoms or cure, or sometimes you think of behavior, preventive behavior of the population of interest. Now, these definitions or this description of what a focus question is assumes that the question is about reasons for persistence, reasons for a particular problem. It could be treatment outcome or poor preventive practice persisting despite the effective treatment is available. And so this could be the reason for raising questions when you are scoping your problem phenomenon. Right, so the research question should match study design as well, because there should be a link between the research question and the study design, because there is a coherent connection that goes from the research question, because the research question needs to be answered, and the study design is what will provide the methodology to answer those questions. So knowing the research question helps the researcher to determine the appropriate type of research design, because answers are desired. Now, using an inappropriate research design for a given research question will make the result invalid, right? Will invalidate whatever result and conclusions. Okay, next one is matching the research question with the study design. We have talked about that. So we have different types of study designs. We have observational study designs. We are very familiar with observational studies. One of them is a cross-sectional study, which is common diagnostic research in public health, the CAP studies that diagnose the behavior. So some of the characteristics these observational studies have includes one or more groups of patients are observed. You are observing, you're not changing anything. You're just observing what is happening, trying to learn something about the characteristics of the dynamics in the patient being observed. So the characteristics are appropriately measured and recorded. Then we have the other type. We have the experimental study design. We shall be going into this in much more detail later on in chapter 3 when we get to methodology. All right. So intervention is performed, effect of the intervention is measured and recorded, and maybe the methodology requires randomization or not, no randomization. All right, so we'll talk about the observational studies that you can see. We have cohort study. These are epidemiological study design. Cohort study focuses on a group of people who have something in common, who remain part of a group and are observed over an extended period. That's cohort. Cohort means they have something in common. So you observe them for whatever risk factors or outcome. Then you have the case control study. Now, this study begins with the absence or even the presence of an outcome and then looks backward or forward in time. So sometimes you say retrospective case control, or we have prospective case control. That means a group case and the other group are control. So we want to detect possible causes or risk factors involved in the problem phenomena. Then the common cross-sectional studies that we use most of the time in diagnostic, public health diagnostic studies, we conduct surveys. Now, this particular type of study collects data from a group of subjects, a part of them, a group of subjects from an entire population, and measure their characteristic at one time rather than over a period, like unlike the cross-sectional case control and cohort study. Now, this type of study design determines what is happening, okay, what is happening right now. And if well designed, it can also give us why what is happening and how. All right, so this study is very important in public health study, public health research. So it captures what is happening at the time the data is collected. Now, this diagram shows us the relative positions and dynamics of the observational study design. So for case control cohorts, it can be going backward in time. From today, we study cases and control, probably records. We look at records. Usually records are done this way because maybe you cannot go back in time except you pick up records of individuals that have been recorded over time, and then you check how the condition, the cases, how the condition started, and then the control, whether the same exposure the cases have, the control have, and why is it that the control did not come out with the disease from the beginning since they are all exposed. Then also, we can also look at case control prospective. So we start from today and we follow them up till sometime in the future. Now we have this randomized control trial, sometimes known as RCT studies. They seem to be regarded as the best type of experimental studies in clinical or in the health sciences. All right, we'll be looking at this in much more detail later on. All right, so this is the design. We'll come to it after we have reached the study area and looking at designs. We'll see how it is done. Very superior type of study design in health sciences. Okay, again, talking about randomized controlled trial, reliable evidence of effect of treatment or preventive intervention. All of these are characteristics. We'll come to them later on. We've touched this in the epidemiological class as an epidemiological clinical study design. All right, so matching question with research design continues. This is a table, type of research practice, and type preferred research design that will help us to get the correct conclusion. All right, treatment or prevention, we can use randomized control trial to give us a good outcome. For diagnosis, we have behavioral diagnosis and the corresponding antecedent. We have cross-sectional analytical studies. Then we also have causation. We want to look at risk factors, determination. Cohort study is very good. Prognosis, outcome. Cohort study is also very appropriate. Now we have this study technique. This is a technique that we can apply in conducting our empirical review, what we call systematic reviews of studies published. Now, what is this systematic reviews of published work? Now, when there are many studies addressing the same research question, we now apply systematic review method, and this provides us a reliable summary of all relevant and available studies. Okay, so what do we get from this? Now, a systematic review is a review addressing a focused question using explicit methods to identify, select, critically appraise, analyze, and summarize results of best available studies. It may or may not include statistical techniques called meta-analysis. So these are very advanced methods. But if we can learn this method and use them in collecting information for conducting our gap analysis under empirical review, it will make the work we're doing very, very, very superior. So systematic review of studies is recognized as the best in the hierarchy of evidence on effects of treatment or preventive intervention, or even conclusions from studies that are derived from studies. Okay, so again, this diagram shows us where study designs are. So at the bottom, expert opinion. Sometimes we have information about remedies, natural remedies. Natural remedies is our expert opinion. They are weak. There are no evidence. We have case report, weak still. Case series, still weak. As we are going up, we are getting more superior. Then cross-sectional studies, somewhere in the middle. Case control, superior. Cohort study, superior. And the most superior is randomized control trial. Strong evidence for the outcome, and this one very weak, subjective, and can easily be dismantled. So using the critical appraisal tool, a set of 10 questions meant to answer 3 broad questions. These are just practical areas. Is the study valid? The study that I'm picking, have I checked through? Am I convinced that this study is valid? The next one, what are the results from the study? Then the next, will the result help solve problems locally? Will it be relevant in my work to provide me the evidence and the support, all right, that I need in developing my own conclusion? And that is what critical appraisal will do for you. Now, did the study ask a clearly focused question? That is it. All of these are evaluative method of deciding which paper. Okay. Did it ask question about the population? Did it include the population of study, the intervention given, or outcomes considered? Okay, so what was this, a randomized controlled trial? And was it appropriately so? Well, these are some of the questions that can be asked, but what we have learned so far is sufficient at this level to quickly extract the evidence to formulate or scope the gap in knowledge where our own research will be situated. So I'll quickly move through these. These are not relevant for this class at this time. All right, there are 10, but they're not really relevant. Okay, so again, another one is how precise are the results? Okay, something about results, that's the outcome of the study with the question the study is asking, the objective the study has set. All of these things are put together. And if there is no connection, the coherence from the problem to the answer is doubtful, then something is wrong. Okay. In statistical terms, we have something like confidence limits, confidence interval, p-values of those. They are all important. We'll look at those. Okay, so I think we should just quickly end this here because this is not very relevant at the moment. So in summary, critical appraisal is a vital step in the practice of evidence-based healthcare. Critical appraisal of a paper should begin with finding the study objective, the research question, all of these, as I've mentioned, determine whether the study method used was appropriate for the research question. Critical appraisal tools are available, and so on. All right, so we are ending this at this point. Thank you very much for listening. We shall be reviewing this on Sunday if you can get this tonight and then read through it. All right, so it's important that you put into practice some of these things. Start to review some papers. All right, we will do this on Sunday when we meet in the next time. Okay, have a nice day. Bye bye.